The sun was just beginning to rise over the small town of Ninepur, its golden light slipping through the fog that floated above the green fields. Birds sang in the distance and the air smelled fresh like wet soil after a long night of rain. In a small, half-broken house near the riverbank, a boy named Arjun sat by the window, staring at the world outside as if it held every answer he ever wanted. Arjun was 14, skinny and always lost in thought. He wasn't like the other boys in his school. While they played cricket or spent their evenings chatting near the tea stall, Arjun spent his time collecting strange stones, insects, and dried leaves. His curiosity about the world had no end. He wanted to understand why things glowed, why they moved, why they existed at all. His mother often said, "Arjun, one day your head will burst from thinking too much," and he would only smile in return. His father, who worked long hours as a bus driver, loved his son deeply but didn't understand him. "Books and thinking don't fill stomachs," he'd say. "Find something real to do." But for Arjun, curiosity was something real. It was the only thing that made him feel alive. Every day after school he would walk toward the old river that curved around the edge of the town. The river wasn't large, but it had a strange, quiet beauty. Clear water running over smooth stones surrounded by trees whose roots dipped into the stream like fingers touching life itself. The villagers called it the Whispering River because on some nights it made sounds like whispers. Many people said it was haunted, but Arjun never believed in ghosts. He believed in science, in facts, in the things that could be seen and touched. One evening, as the sun dipped behind the trees, he noticed something strange. He was sitting on a flat rock near the river when a faint blue glow appeared in the shallow water. At first he thought it was his imagination, but when he looked closer he saw tiny stones glowing faintly under the surface, their light soft and steady. He reached into the cold water, picked one up, and held it in his palm. It wasn't like anything he'd ever seen before. The stone was smooth, small, and looked ordinary in daylight, but the glow, even under the setting sun, was real. He stayed there until it was dark, collecting a few of the glowing stones in a small jar. On his way home, the light from the jar flickered softly and he couldn't stop smiling. When he reached home, his mother scolded him for being late. "What's that in your hand?" she asked. "Just stones," he replied quickly. "Throw them out." "You bring useless things every day," she sighed. But Arjun didn't throw them out. That night, when everyone had gone to sleep, he took out the jar and placed it on his study table. The light still shone, soft and blue, filling the small room with a calm glow. He sat there watching, wondering, why did these stones glow only near the river? The next day at school, he told his best friend Rafiq about it. Rafiq laughed. "Maybe ghosts live in your river," he teased. "Or maybe the stones ate fireflies." Arjun rolled his eyes. "No, there's something else. I'm going to find out." He went back to the river after school and collected more stones, this time from different spots. Some glowed, some didn't. He noticed something. The glowing ones were always wet. When he dried them, the light faded away. When he sprinkled water again, they glowed faintly once more. It was the beginning of his obsession. Days turned into weeks. Every evening, Arjun carried his small notebook, writing down his observations: temperature, time, moisture, color. He didn't know how deep his curiosity was pulling him. One evening, his teacher, Mr. Dinesh, saw him sitting alone near the science lab after class. "Arjun, what are you doing here so late?" he asked. "I'm studying something, sir." "Something strange? What kind of strange?" Arjun hesitated. "Some stones that glow at night." Mr. Dinesh laughed softly. "Maybe it's just phosphorus, my boy. It's common. Don't waste too much time on silly things. Focus on your exams." But Arjun didn't stop. At night, while others slept, he sat at his desk with a torchlight, examining the stones with a magnifying glass. He had no proper lab, no fancy equipment, just an old notebook, a torch, and an endless hunger to know why. He noticed that the light from the stones wasn't consistent. Sometimes it brightened when he touched it with wet fingers. Sometimes it dimmed when he blew warm air over it. He started to think maybe it wasn't just the stone glowing. Maybe something on it was alive. He wanted to tell someone who would understand, but he didn't know who to go to. The villagers would call it witchcraft. His teacher had already dismissed it. His father would only get angry if he found out his son was wasting time again. So Arjun kept it a secret. Then one evening, something unexpected happened. As he sat by the river, he heard footsteps behind him. It was an older woman with short hair wearing glasses, someone he had never seen before. "You're Arjun, right?" she asked gently. He nodded, confused. "Yes, but how do you know me?" "I'm Professor Meera Sharma from the City University. Your teacher told me about you. The boy who sees light in stones." He blushed, embarrassed. "It's nothing, ma'am. Probably just some reaction." She smiled. "Well, let me see it for myself." They walked to the river together. Arjun picked up a glowing stone and held it out. Meera knelt beside the water, eyes wide as the faint light shone in the dark. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. Finally, she said, "This isn't phosphorus. This is something else." Arjun looked at her, his heart racing. For the first time, someone believed him. She asked if she could take a few samples back to her lab for testing. He agreed instantly. As they walked back, she said softly, "You remind me of myself when I was your age, curious, stubborn, and brave. Don't lose that." That night, Arjun couldn't sleep. He lay on his bed, staring at the ceiling, feeling something new inside him. Hope. He had spent weeks feeling alone, like his curiosity was a burden. But now, someone from the scientific world had seen what he saw. Maybe, just maybe, it meant something. Days passed, and he heard nothing from the professor. He began to think maybe she had forgotten, or maybe it turned out to be nothing special after all. But he still went to the river, still collected samples, still wrote down his notes. Then one morning, as he was helping his mother clean the porch, a black car stopped outside their gate. A woman stepped out. Professor Meera. She was smiling. "Arjun," she said, "we need to talk." He ran toward her, nervous and excited. "Did you find something?" She nodded slowly, her eyes filled with amazement. "Yes, and I think you found something far bigger than you can imagine." He couldn't speak. His hands trembled as she showed him a folder filled with printed lab results. "The glow," she said, "isn't chemical. It's alive, Arjun. You discovered a living organism inside those stones." Arjun stared at her in disbelief. "Alive?" he whispered. "Yes. Something the world hasn't seen before." The words echoed in his mind. He looked toward the river in the distance, the same place where everyone said ghosts lived. But now he knew it was something entirely different. It wasn't ghosts, it was life. Hidden, quiet, and waiting for someone curious enough to notice. That night, as he sat by the river again, the moonlight falling across the water, Arjun felt tears in his eyes. Not because of pride, but because everything suddenly made sense. All those nights he stayed awake, all the teasing, all the doubt. It had led to this. The glowing stones shimmered softly beside him as if the river itself was smiling back. He didn't know what would happen next or how big this discovery might become. But deep down he felt something change inside him. The beginning of a journey that would soon shake the entire world of science. And as the cold wind brushed past his face, Arjun whispered quietly to himself, "The world hides its secrets for those who dare to see." When the news finally reached the small town that Arjun's discovery had caught the attention of scientists, most people didn't believe it. The villagers who once called him the mad science boy now whispered different things. Some said he had found a magic stone. Others said he was lying for attention. But Arjun didn't care. For the first time in his life, he was not chasing answers alone. Professor Meera had returned to the city with samples of the glowing stones. She promised Arjun she would share updates as soon as the lab finished their initial tests. A few days later, she called him from her office. Her voice carried both excitement and disbelief. "Arjun," she said, "we've repeated the tests 3 times. The light isn't caused by any chemical reaction. It's something biological, a living microorganism that reacts to moisture and temperature." He didn't say anything for a few seconds. He could hear the professor typing on her keyboard in the background, talking to her colleagues, her tone filled with amazement. "It's possible," she continued, "that these microorganisms are a completely new species. I've never seen anything like it. They produce light without oxygen. That's impossible, at least according to what we know." Arjun didn't understand everything she said, but one word stayed in his mind. New. A new species, something the world had never seen before. The next morning, his father came home early from work. He looked tired, holding his lunchbox in one hand. Arjun hesitated before showing him the folder of reports Professor Meera had sent. His father flipped through the papers, confused by all the scientific terms. "What is all this?" he asked. Arjun said quietly. "They said it's something new, Papa. Something no one has found before." For a long moment his father didn't speak. He placed a hand on Arjun's shoulder and said, "If this is true, then you've done something great, son. Maybe your curiosity wasn't such a waste after all." It was the first time his father had ever said something like that. Arjun smiled softly, feeling a warmth inside that no sunlight could give. A week later, Professor Mira called again. "I've spoken with my university head. We want you to come to the city, Arjun. We want you to see the lab, meet the team, and share what you found." The journey to the city was something Arjun would never forget. He had never been on a train before. As the wheels clattered over the tracks, he watched the world race by. Villages, rivers, fields, and towns, each one a blur of color and sound. He carried a small bag with 2 changes of clothes, his notebook, and one of the glowing stones carefully wrapped in cloth. When he arrived at the city station, Professor Mira was waiting for him with a warm smile. "Welcome, scientist," she said playfully. He blushed, shaking his head. "I'm not a scientist, ma'am. Just curious." "That's where every scientist begins," she replied. The university lab was like a different world. Bright lights, metal tables, machines that hummed softly, people wearing white coats moving quickly with test tubes and computers. Arjun stood there quietly, wide-eyed. He had imagined such a place many times, but seeing it was something else. It smelled of chemicals and possibility. Mira introduced him to her team. "This is Arjun, the boy who found our mystery." Some smiled, some nodded politely, and one young researcher whispered, "You're really the one who found it?" "Incredible." They placed the stone under a powerful microscope. Arjun watched as the glowing dots moved slowly inside the screen. Mira pointed to the image. "See that? Those tiny things moving, those are the microorganisms. They're alive just like bacteria, but different. They create their own light." Arjun's mouth fell open slightly.
"They're alive?"
"Yes," Mira said softly. "And they only survive in very specific conditions. Heat, moisture, and the minerals in those river stones. You may have discovered a new form of life that adapts in ways we never imagined." The next few days were a whirlwind. The team ran dozens of tests, temperature experiments, chemical reactions, microscopic imaging. Arjun watched every process with fascination. Sometimes the scientists asked him simple questions about how and where he found the stones, how deep the water was, what time of day it glowed brightest. He answered as best as he could, proud that his little notebook was finally useful to someone other than himself. But not everyone was convinced. One morning, a senior researcher entered the lab, frowning. "I still think this is contamination," he said sharply. "Maybe phosphorescent algae got mixed in the samples. It's not new life. It's a mistake." Mira looked at him calmly. "We've tested 3 separate samples from different locations. They all show the same results." "Still," he said, glancing at Arjun, "a boy from a village finding something that thousands of trained scientists missed? It's hard to believe," the word stung. Arjun looked down, feeling small. But Mira stepped forward. "Sometimes discoveries don't come from laboratories," she said firmly. "They come from eyes that notice what others ignore." The room fell silent. Later that evening, as the sun set outside the glass windows, Arjun stood beside the microscope again, watching the tiny glowing shapes move. He whispered under his breath, "They're alive," and no one even knew. There was a strange beauty in that thought, how something so small, invisible to the naked eye, could hold the power to change what people knew about life itself. That night, Mira invited Arjun to her home for dinner. It was a small apartment filled with books and plants. Her husband, an engineer, smiled and asked Arjun about his dreams. "Do you want to be a scientist when you grow up?" he asked. Arjun hesitated. "I don't know. I just want to keep learning. There's so much out there we don't understand." Mira smiled. "Then you already are one." After dinner, as he stood on the balcony looking at the glowing city lights, he thought of his river, quiet, dark, untouched by all this noise. It amazed him how 2 worlds could be so different, and yet connected by the same small stones that glowed softly in his hands. The next day, reporters began to call the lab. Somehow the news had leaked. Village boy discovers new life form in river stones. Cameras arrived, journalists asked questions, Flashes filled the air. Arjun stood nervously behind Mira as she handled most of the interviews. She made sure his name was mentioned again and again. "This discovery began because of a boy's curiosity," she said proudly. "Science doesn't always happen in big labs. It starts with asking simple questions." The story spread fast. Newspapers wrote about him, and social media was filled with his picture, a shy boy holding a small glowing stone. His classmates back home were stunned. Some sent messages saying, "We saw you on TV." His teacher, Mr. Dinesh, called to apologize. "I underestimated you, Arjun," he said softly. "You've made us proud." But Arjun didn't let it get to his head. When Mira asked how he felt about all the attention, he simply said, "I'm just happy that the world finally saw what I saw." A few weeks later, scientists from different countries contacted Mira's lab. They wanted samples for independent testing. The data was shared, and soon several research papers began to mention Arjun's discovery. Some still doubted, but many were fascinated. It wasn't every day that a teenager stumbled upon a new form of life. One night, after all the chaos, Mira found Arjun sitting quietly in the lab. "You should be proud," she said. "Do you know what this means for science?" He looked at her, thoughtful. "It means the river wasn't haunted," he said with a small smile. "It was alive," she laughed softly. "Yes, you've turned superstition into science." He grinned, but then asked, "Ma'am, what will happen to the glowing stones now?" "They'll be studied all over the world," she replied. "But they'll always be yours, Arjun. You were the first to see them, to believe in them." He nodded, and for the first time, he felt something bigger than happiness and a quiet sense of purpose. He realized curiosity wasn't just about finding answers. It was about believing that even the smallest thing, even something hidden in the mud of a forgotten river, could hold a truth waiting to be discovered. As the night grew silent, the machines hummed softly in the background, and Arjun looked at the glowing microorganisms on the screen. Tiny lights moving gently, just like stars in a river, and somewhere deep inside, he knew this was only the beginning of something much bigger. The days that followed were nothing short of unbelievable for Arjun. Life had changed faster than he ever imagined. Just a month ago, he was a quiet schoolboy collecting stones by the river. Now scientists were calling him, reporters were writing about him, and professors were speaking his name in conferences. But inside, he was still the same boy who sat by the riverbank, trying to understand the world's secrets. Back in the city, Professor Mira's lab had turned into the center of a scientific storm. Every morning, new emails poured in from research centers across the world. Everyone wanted to know more about the strange microorganisms that lived inside the stones. Scientists from Germany, Japan, and the United States were asking for samples, theories, and proof. The discovery had stirred curiosity and disbelief in equal measure. But fame in science didn't come without doubt. A few weeks later, during a video conference call with international scientists, one elderly biologist from London said bluntly, "With all due respect, it's hard to believe a 14-year-old boy found something that escaped decades of geological and biological research." Mira replied calmly, "That's exactly what makes discovery beautiful. Sometimes it takes fresh eyes to notice what others overlook." Arjun listened quietly beside her, nervous but proud. He didn't understand every scientific term flying across the screen, but he could sense the tension. Some of them admired him. Others didn't. They saw him as an accident, a lucky find. But for Arjun, it wasn't luck. It was curiosity, patience, and countless hours of watching, wondering, and believing in what he saw. The lab continued its experiments day and night. Each test revealed something even more unbelievable than before. The microorganisms weren't just bioluminescent. They had an unusual way of generating light energy without using oxygen. Unlike known glowing bacteria found in deep oceans, these lived inside dry, mineral-rich stones in freshwater. It was something completely new, something that broke existing rules of biology. One of the younger scientists, Arav, told Arjun one evening, "You know, this could change how we understand life itself. If these tiny things can live like this, who knows what else is out there in places we've never looked?" Arjun looked up, thoughtful. Maybe the world is full of hidden life waiting for someone to notice. Arav smiled. "Maybe that someone is you." While the scientific community debated, the story spread among the public too. News channels called it the boy who found living light. Social media exploded with posts and photos of the glowing stones. Some said it was a miracle. Others said it was proof that nature still held secrets even science hadn't unlocked. Arjun's school organized a special assembly in his honor. The principal handed him a certificate and said, "You've shown all of us that curiosity is more powerful than fear. We are proud of you." His classmates clapped, and even the boys who once laughed at him looked at him differently now. He didn't feel superior. He just felt grateful that his quiet search for answers had meant something. But the real shock was yet to come. A few weeks later, Professor Mira called Arjun into the lab early one morning. She looked serious but excited. "Arjun," she said, "you need to see this." He followed her to the microscope station. On the screen was a magnified image of the microorganisms. They were glowing brighter than ever, but that wasn't what surprised him. Next to the screen was a graph showing energy levels measured during the light emission process. "What is that?" he asked softly. "It's energy output," Mira explained. "We ran tests last night to see how much light they produce. The results were shocking. These microorganisms don't just emit light. They store energy from heat and moisture. They can release it later, just like small living batteries." Arjun's eyes widened. "You mean they can make energy?" "In a way, yes," Mira said. "If this process can be understood, it could lead to completely clean, renewable biological energy. No pollution, no waste." The room fell silent. Even the senior researchers who had doubted the discovery stood still, staring at the data. What started as a glowing stone from a quiet river was now turning into something that could change the future of energy research. By evening, Mira had already sent the data to several universities for peer review. Within days, scientists around the world confirmed the findings. The microorganism, and still unnamed, was capable of creating and storing energy naturally. It was an entirely new biological mechanism. The world of science buzzed with excitement. News outlets called it the discovery of the decade. Arjun's name appeared in newspapers everywhere. A boy's curiosity leads to a breakthrough in sustainable energy. When Arjun saw his photo on the front page, he didn't know how to feel. It didn't feel real. He wasn't used to being famous. He missed sitting quietly by the river, the sound of crickets and the way the light shimmered on the water. Fame was exciting, but the peace he found in discovery was what he missed most. One afternoon, while sitting in the lab alone, Arjun received a letter. It was from a small science club in a nearby town. The letter said, "You made us believe that science isn't only for adults. You made us believe that even we can discover something new." He smiled reading it. That letter meant more to him than any news headline, because that's what he really wanted. Not fame, but inspiration. Meanwhile, Mira and her team were preparing to present their findings at an international science conference. "We want you there, Arjun," she told him. "This is your discovery as much as ours." The conference was held in Delhi. The hall was filled with hundreds of scientists, journalists, and students from across the world. Bright lights, camera flashes, and whispers filled the air as Professor Mira took the stage. Arjun sat beside her, wearing a simple shirt and holding his small notebook, the same one he had used by the river months ago. When Mira began her presentation, the audience watched in awe as pictures of the glowing stones appeared on the big screen. She explained how a boy's observation had led to the discovery of a microorganism capable of storing natural energy. When she said, "This boy's curiosity led us here," the entire room turned toward Arjun. For a moment, he felt his heart race. The applause was thunderous. When the session ended, scientists surrounded him, asking questions, shaking his hand, praising his courage. One elderly researcher told him, "Son, you reminded all of us why we started doing science, not for awards, but for wonder." That night, back in his hotel room, Arjun sat by the window watching the lights of the city. He thought of the river again, quiet, peaceful, glowing softly under the moon. He missed it, and he promised himself he would visit as soon as he returned home. But the next morning, he woke up to another surprise. His phone was flooded with messages. International institutes wanted to name the microorganism officially. They decided to call it Arjunia luminis after him. When Mira told him he couldn't speak, tears filled his eyes. He whispered, "You mean it has my name?" Mira nodded. "It's your discovery. You deserve it." Arjun's parents were overwhelmed when they heard the news. His mother cried, holding his photo close. His father, for the first time, told everyone proudly, "My son found something the world had never seen. But even with all the praise, Arjun stayed grounded. When journalists asked what his next goal was, he said, "To keep asking questions." That's how discovery begins. In the days that followed, as scientists continued studying Arjunia luminis, they found more possibilities: its ability to survive in extreme heat, its self-sustaining energy cycle, and its potential use in clean technology. The discovery was rewriting textbooks, and yet Arjun didn't see himself as a genius or a hero. He saw himself as the same curious boy who once sat by a river, staring at glowing stones under the stars. He often told Mira, "The real discovery isn't in the microscope. It's in seeing what others ignore." She always replied with a smile. "And that's why science needs people like you." That evening, as the lab lights dimmed and the city outside sparkled, Arjun walked to the rooftop. The wind was cool, the sky dark, and the stars above seemed to glow just like the stones that started it all. He closed his eyes and whispered, "Thank you, river, for showing me the light." What began as one boy's quiet curiosity had now become a beacon of hope, a reminder that sometimes the biggest discoveries come from the smallest corners of the world. And that one spark of curiosity can light up the path for the entire world. The world had now heard of Arjun and his glowing stones. His name was written in science magazines, newspapers, and even appeared in documentaries. Reporters called him the boy who found living light, while scientists called him a natural genius. But deep inside, Arjun didn't see himself that way. He was still that same boy from Nainpur, who once sat by the quiet river wondering why the stones glowed in the dark. After the conference, everything changed. The research on Arjunia luminis, the microorganism named after him, spread to laboratories around the world. Scientists in Japan found that these microorganisms could survive extreme cold. A team in the United States discovered that they could regenerate even after being dried for months. The possibilities seemed endless. Some even believed this new form of life could one day help power small devices without electricity. But while the world celebrated, Arjun felt the weight of attention growing heavier. He received letters from universities, invitations from institutes, and requests for interviews. People wanted to meet the boy behind the discovery, to take pictures, to hear his story. Some wanted to use his discovery to make money, and not everyone's intentions were pure. One afternoon, as Arjun sat in the university garden, Professor Mira joined him with 2 cups of tea. She noticed his quiet face. "You look worried," she said gently. He nodded. "It's just, everyone wants something. They call it science, but some people talk about selling it, using it for profit. That's not what I wanted. I just wanted to understand." Mira smiled sadly. "That's how the world works, Arjun. When something new is discovered, it attracts both light and shadow. But don't forget, your curiosity started this. You have a say in how it's used." He looked down at his cup, his reflection trembling in the tea. "Do you think I did the right thing?" Mira placed her hand on his shoulder. "You did the best thing anyone could do. You saw what others ignored. The rest we'll handle with care." But handling it wasn't easy. Within weeks, companies began contacting the university. Some claimed they could develop new eco-friendly batteries using the microorganism. Others wanted to buy the research rights altogether. One company even offered a large sum of money, enough to change Arjun's family's life forever. When Mira told him about it, Arjun fell silent. The thought of helping his parents was tempting. He knew how hard his father worked every day, and how his mother struggled to make ends meet. But something inside him resisted the idea of selling what he had found. He said quietly, "It doesn't belong to me, ma'am. It belongs to nature. I didn't make it, I just saw it." Mira looked at him with pride. "You're wiser than most grown scientists I know." Back home, his parents didn't fully understand what was happening in the scientific world, but they noticed how people treated their son differently now. Neighbors who once laughed at him now greeted him respectfully. His father would proudly tell passengers on his bus, "That boy on the news? That's my son." His mother, though, worried that fame might take her boy away. Every time he called from the city, she would say, "Don't forget where you came from, Arjun." He never did. Despite the noise around him, Arjun stayed focused on what truly mattered, understanding the mystery more deeply. He returned to Nainpur one weekend with Mira and her team to collect more samples from the river. The villagers gathered around curiously as they unpacked their instruments. Children watched in awe as scientists in white coats knelt beside the glowing water. For Arjun, it was an emotional moment, returning to the same place where it all began. He crouched near the water, dipped his hand into the stream, and watched the faint glow ripple under his touch. It felt like greeting an old friend. The river was the same, quiet and beautiful, as if it was waiting for him. Mira watched him from a distance. "You know," she said softly, "this place should be protected." "It's a natural wonder," Arjun nodded. "It's not just the river. It's everything connected to it, the soil, the trees, the air. Maybe that's why these microorganisms exist here. Maybe they're part of something bigger." She smiled. "You think like a scientist and a poet." He laughed lightly. "Maybe both." That night, as they stayed in the small guest house near the river, Arjun couldn't sleep. He went outside and looked up at the stars. The air was cool and the sounds of insects filled the night. The glow from the river shimmered faintly in the distance, like a secret whisper of nature itself. He thought about everything that had happened: the discovery, the scientists, the applause, the offers, the doubts, and the hope. He realized that science wasn't just about discovery. It was about responsibility, about protecting what was found, not just using it. The next morning he told Mira, "Ma'am, we shouldn't let anyone own this. It should stay free for study and for nature." Mira nodded thoughtfully. "Then that's what we'll do. We'll make it open research. No patents, no ownership, just knowledge for everyone," and they did. When the university announced that the discovery would remain open for all researchers to study freely, it shocked many corporations that wanted control. But it also inspired scientists across the world. They called it the Arjun Principle, the idea that discovery should serve humanity, not profit. Letters began to pour in from students and teachers. A young girl from South Africa wrote, "You made me believe that one person's curiosity can change the world." A teacher from Nepal sent a note saying, "Your story is now part of our classroom lessons." Arjun read each one with a heart full of gratitude, but even as his name grew, he stayed grounded. He returned to school for a few months, hoping to finish his studies quietly. The teachers treated him differently now, with admiration and respect. During a science class, his teacher asked him to speak. Arjun stood at the front looking at his classmates. "I didn't do anything special," he said simply. "I just asked questions. Anyone can do that. The world is full of mysteries. You just have to look closely and believe in what you see." His words stayed with everyone long after he left the classroom. Meanwhile, scientists continued to unlock more secrets from Arjunia luminis. They discovered that it could be used to power small sensors in remote areas, creating light where electricity couldn't reach. It had the potential to help villages and communities in need. And every time a researcher mentioned the name Arjunia, Arjun's story followed. The boy who believed in curiosity more than fame. Months later, Arjun received an invitation to speak at a global youth science summit in Singapore. He was nervous, but Mira encouraged him. "Don't think about your English or your accent," she said. "Just speak from your heart." When he stood on that stage, looking at hundreds of young students from around the world, he took a deep breath. "When I first found the glowing stones," he began, "I didn't think I was discovering anything special. I just wanted to understand what I saw. But what I learned was that science isn't only about experiments or big labs. It's about curiosity. It's about looking at something ordinary and asking, why? That's how I found my answer. And maybe you'll find yours too." The applause that followed wasn't just for his discovery, it was for his spirit. That evening, after the summit ended, Arjun sat by the hotel window, watching the city lights reflected in the water below. For a moment, he imagined the glow of his river merging with the lights of the city. He realized something important. The world was full of light, but it took curiosity to see where it truly came from. He closed his eyes and whispered to himself, "The river gave me light, and I'll spend my life giving that light back." Months had turned into years since Arjun's discovery changed the world of science, yet he remained the same, humble, quiet, and endlessly curious. The glowing microorganism that once lived unseen beneath the waters of a small river had now become a subject of study in over 30 countries. Scientists called it a gift of nature. Villagers back in Nainpur still called it Arjun's light. For Arjun, life had become a blend of two worlds, one rooted in his small hometown, and another reaching out across the globe. He was now studying environmental biology at a leading institute, working alongside brilliant minds. But no matter how advanced the technology or how modern the labs became, he never forgot the feeling of sitting by that river, seeing the stones light up for the first time. Every evening, after his research work, he would walk to the campus garden and sit quietly. His notebook filled with sketches and notes was always with him. Sometimes he would write small thoughts. Curiosity has no age. Nature is the greatest teacher. And sometimes he would just draw small, glowing shapes, like the ones that changed his life. One day, while he was reviewing some samples in the lab, Professor Mira came in with a proud smile. "You should see this," she said, handing him a letter. It was from an international foundation announcing that Arjun would receive the Global Youth Science Award for his contribution to environmental discovery and open research. Arjun read the letter quietly. His hands trembled a little. I didn't do all this for awards," he said softly. Mira smiled. "I know. But sometimes the world needs people like you to remind them why we do science in the first place." The award ceremony was held in Geneva. Arjun stood on a stage brighter than anything he had ever seen. Around him were scientists, politicians, and leaders from across the world. When they called his name, he walked up slowly, his heart pounding. Cameras flashed and people applauded. The host handed him the glass trophy engraved with his name, but when Arjun spoke, his words were not about fame. "I come from a small village," he said, his voice steady but emotional. "I never thought that my curiosity would take me this far. I only followed a question. And that question led me to light, not just in the river but inside myself. I believe that every child, no matter where they come from, has that same light. We just need to let it shine." The audience stood and clapped for a long time. Some even wiped their tears. It wasn't the discovery alone that moved them. It was his purity, the way he spoke with the heart of a child who still believed in wonder. After the ceremony, as Arjun walked out into the cool night, he called his parents. His mother picked up. "Arjun, is everything all right?" she asked anxiously. He smiled, holding back tears. "Amma, I got the award. They gave it to me because of our river." There was silence on the other end, then his mother's soft, trembling voice. "That river blessed you, Beta. You listened to it when no one else did." That night, Arjun couldn't sleep. He stood by the window of his hotel room, looking at the stars above the foreign city. Somewhere deep down, he felt a quiet gratitude. To the river, to the stones, to his teacher, to every person who believed in him. But most of all, to curiosity itself. Back in India, the story of Arjun's discovery continued to grow. A team of scientists developed a method using Arjunia luminis to produce eco-friendly biolights for rural areas. They could glow for hours without electricity, powered only by moisture and air. Villages that once lived in darkness now had small lamps that shimmered softly through the night. The first prototype lamp was sent to Nainpur, to Arjun's home. When his parents turned it on for the first time, his father smiled and said, "See, your light has come home." Children from nearby schools started visiting the river, learning about microorganisms, life forms, and environmental care. They spoke of science not as something far away, but something living right beside them. Many of them dreamed of becoming scientists because of him. As Arjun grew older, he began traveling to schools around the country, giving talks to young students. He didn't use big words or scientific jargon. He just told his story. He told them how a boy's simple question changed everything. He showed pictures of his village, of the river, of the glowing stones. And every time he would end his talk the same way. Don't wait for someone else to tell you what's possible. The world's biggest discoveries often start with the smallest questions. People listened, and many began to believe. Years later, Arjun completed his studies and returned to his hometown for good. The world knew him as a scientist, but in his heart he was still the boy who sat beside a quiet river. He built a small research center near the same riverbank, dedicated to studying nature and helping local children learn about science. He named it the Light of Curiosity Center. Every day, children from the village would come to the center. They would look through microscopes, collect water samples, and write their own little discoveries in notebooks. And every evening, Arjun would take them to the river and show them where it all began. "This," he would say, pointing at the softly glowing water, "is where I learned that magic and science are the same thing." Both start when you believe. The children would smile, their eyes wide with wonder just as his once were. As the years went by, Arjun's research center grew, attracting visitors from across the world. Scientists who once worked in big labs came to see the humble place where a young boy's curiosity began a new chapter in science. The river became protected land. No construction, no pollution, only study and preservation. It was declared a natural heritage site, with a small plaque at the edge of the water that read, "Here." A boy's question lit the world. One evening, after the last group of visitors had left, Arjun sat alone by the river again. The sun was setting, casting golden light on the surface. He dipped his fingers into the cool water and saw that faint, familiar glow return beneath his touch. It had been years, but it still felt alive, like an old friend greeting him once more. He smiled softly. "You're still shining," he whispered. The river's light flickered, reflecting in his eyes. As the sky darkened, the glow of the microorganisms shimmered across the water, just as they had on that very first day. Arjun closed his eyes and listened to the soft hum of crickets, the whisper of the wind through the trees, and the heartbeat of nature all around him. In that peaceful moment, he realized that life had come full circle. He had found his light, not in fame, not in awards, but in the endless wonder of learning and giving back. And somewhere deep within, he knew that as long as there were people who looked at the world with curiosity, the light would never fade. The boy who once solved a mystery that left scientists in absolute shock had now become the man who inspired a generation to believe that even the smallest question could lead to the brightest light. And as night fell, the river of Nainpur glowed again, carrying its secret softly through the dark, a living reminder of one boy's endless curiosity and the light it gave the world. Years moved forward like the slow current of the Nainpur River. The world changed, technology advanced, cities grew and new inventions emerged, but the story of the boy who found light in the dark never faded. It lived on in books, documentaries, and classrooms around the world. Students read about Arjunia Luminous not just as a scientific marvel, but as a story of human curiosity and faith in nature. Arjun, now in his early 40s, had silver strands in his hair and calm wisdom in his eyes. He still lived in Nainpur, in a modest home near the same river that had shaped his destiny. His research center had grown into a well-known institute, attracting young minds from around the world who wanted to learn science not from machines, but from nature itself. Every morning, Arjun would walk to the riverbank with his cup of tea, watching the sunlight dance on the water. He had seen countless sunrises here, but each one still felt new. To him, the world never stopped being mysterious. He believed that wonder didn't fade with age, it only deepened. One day, as he sat quietly, a young girl approached him. She couldn't have been more than 12. She wore a school uniform, her notebook hugged tightly to her chest. "Sir," she said shyly, "my teacher told me you found the glowing river. Is that true?" Arjun smiled warmly. "Yes, that's true. But I didn't really find it. It found me." She tilted her head, puzzled. "How can a river find someone?" He chuckled softly. "Sometimes when you listen carefully, the world shows you what you need to see. That's what happened to me." The girl's eyes widened. "I want to be like you. I want to find something no one has seen." "You already can," Arjun replied. "All you have to do is keep asking why. Never stop asking that question." She smiled, nodded eagerly, and ran back toward her friends. Arjun watched her go, his heart full. He saw in her the same spark he once carried, that restless curiosity that refuses to sleep. Later that day, he visited the research center. Inside, the walls were lined with photographs of students, scientists in the early days of discovery. In the center of the hall stood a glass tank containing a small amount of river water that still glowed faintly in the dark. Below it was a plaque that read, "Light is born from those who dare to wonder." His assistant, Ria, greeted him with a smile. "Sir, the team from Japan is arriving next week. They're coming to study the latest samples." "Good," Arjun said. "Tell them the same thing we tell everyone. They can study it freely, but they must respect the river." Ria nodded. "Of course. Everyone knows that's your first rule," he smiled. "It's not my rule. It's nature's." That evening, Arjun received a video call from Professor Meera. Though older now, her eyes still carried that same kindness and brilliance. "Arjun," she said, smiling through the screen. I just saw a news report about your students' latest work. They're using Arjunia luminis to restore polluted water bodies. You must be proud, I am, he replied softly. But it's their curiosity that matters most. The light keeps finding new people. Mira laughed. It always does. You started something beautiful, Arjun. You turned discovery into a movement. He looked away for a moment, humbled. It wasn't me, ma'am. It was the river. I just happened to listen. Before hanging up, Mira said something that stayed with him long after the call ended. You know, Arjun, in all my years as a scientist, I've learned many theories. But the one thing I'll never forget is the lesson you taught me, that sometimes wonder is the purest form of science. That night, a gentle rain fell over Nainpur. The sound of droplets filled the air and the river shimmered faintly as if alive again. Arjun stepped outside, letting the rain soak his face. He could feel the heartbeat of the earth and the rhythm of the drops. He whispered to himself, "You're still speaking to me, aren't you?" In the reflection of the river, he saw his younger self, barefoot, curious, holding a glowing stone under the moonlight. He smiled. The boy he once was had never left him. He simply grew into the man who kept the promise to protect that light. Months later, the Nainpur Research Center hosted a global science camp for children. Students from different countries came together to learn about sustainable science and the environment. Arjun led the opening session. He stood before hundreds of young faces, all eager and wide-eyed. He began with a story. His story. "I was once a boy like you," he said softly. "I didn't have fancy tools or big laboratories. I only had questions. And sometimes that's all you need to begin. Because the world will always whisper its secrets. You just have to be quiet enough to listen." He paused, scanning the crowd. Science isn't about fame. It's not about proving others wrong. It's about understanding what's right in front of us, the trees, the air, the water, the light. Every time you look at the world with wonder, you're already a scientist. When he finished, the hall erupted in applause. But Arjun didn't feel pride. He felt peace. The light had passed on. It no longer belonged to him alone. After the camp ended, he walked down to the river one last time that day. The sun was setting, and the water glowed softly as dusk settled in. Birds flew low and the air smelled of rain and earth. Arjun sat on the same stone where he had once picked up the glowing pebbles decades ago. He reached into his pocket and took out a small, smooth stone, one that had stopped glowing long ago. He smiled, tracing its surface with his thumb. "Thank you," he whispered, "for showing me that even in darkness there's always light." He tossed the stone gently back into the river. The ripples spread, catching the golden reflection of the sunset. For a moment, just before the light disappeared, he thought he saw a faint shimmer, as if the river itself was saying goodbye. Years later, when Arjun passed away peacefully in his sleep, the entire world mourned the man who taught them to listen to nature. His students continued his work, his institute grew stronger, and his river remained protected forever. And on quiet nights in Nainpur, when the moonlight touches the water, the river still glows, not brightly but softly like a whisper. The villagers say it's Arjun's light, living on in the heart of nature. Children still come to the bank and look at the glowing ripples with wonder, whispering the story of the boy who believed in light. They say if you stand there long enough and listen carefully, you can almost hear his voice in the wind. Never stop asking why. And somewhere deep beneath the surface, the glow continues, a reminder that one person's curiosity can light up generations to come.